Hey there, my friends. Welcome to another Holy Shed, the tiniest parish in Christendom. And it's great to have you on yet another bank holiday weekend in May, and a sunny one for many of us. I mean, blinking heck, what is the world coming to? A bank holiday with sunshine? Almost an oxymoron. But wherever you are and whatever the weather, you know it. The Holy Shed is the place to be. Somewhere to sit back, maybe have a sip, but certainly to have a bit of a think about stuff. So, with all that in mind, the coronation. With the coronation of King Charles fading into the mists of time, well, about a month ago anyway, I've been giving it a little bit of thought. As I've said before, I'm not much of a monarchist, not much of a republican. It's an important debate for sure, to which I'm happy to contribute. But that's not what I want to talk about today. Well, maybe a little. An interesting reaction to the coronation, which I've picked up, especially among non-churchgoers, is surprise. Basically, surprise that the ceremony was so religious. I've had people say to me on a number of occasions, it was very religious, wasn't it? Well, it did happen in a rather large church with lines of bishops decked in Sunday best mitres and copes. So there is a bit of a clue there. And seriously, the fact is, it's all about religion. The coronation is a service of Christian worship, traditionally framed within Holy Communion, though only two people get to receive communion. And it's all directly modelled on the biblical crowning of kings in ancient Israel, in what we call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, where, kings were appointed by God and anointed with holy oil, just like King Charles was anointed by the Archbishop of Canterbury. So it is all about religion. But for me, it was religion with too few concessions to the modern critical age and to a nation that is no longer familiar with or particularly interested in the Church of England or Church of England liturgy. There was a time, I am sure, when even if people didn't attend church regularly, they pretty much knew what was going on or what to expect if they did turn up. A time when Britain could more reasonably be called a Christian country. But those days are long gone, as the recent census showed us when it told us that now less than half the population identify as Christian. And Church of England attendance is less than 1% of the population, and a third of them are over 70. So, to me, the coronation service was an opportunity lost, an opportunity for probably the most watched church service in our lifetime to convey something of a faith bravely and imaginatively embracing the future instead of nostalgically clinging to the past. But all of that aside, what perplexed me most of all was the continued inclusion of the monarch's pledge to maintain the Reformed Protestant religion in the United Kingdom and also maintain a continued Protestant succession to the throne, all of which transports us painfully, I think, back to 17th century bloody conflict between Catholics and Protestants and the 1689 accession of William and Mary to the throne, displacing the Catholic King James II. But hey, this is the 21st century, for goodness sake, not the 17th. And all of that is not the world we now live in, or wish to live in, I hope. Catholics and Protestants share equal citizenship in the UK, not to mention the millions of people of all faiths and none who now comprise modern Britain. The King's Prayer in the service, to be a blessing to all of God's children of every faith and conviction, was definitely welcome from my point of view. But his required commitment to maintain the Protestant Reformed religion, what a mouthful, established by law, and furthermore, to preserve inviolably the doctrine, worship, discipline and government of the Church of England. Well, words fail. I mean, how can anyone support such embedded sectarianism, which let's face it, contributes not a jot to a vision of a more harmonious world or to fostering an integrated society. What a ludicrous anomaly all of that Reformed Protestant religion is. Surely in a multicultural, multi-faith society, if the king is to defend anything, it should be the right of religious freedom and diversity, not to defend the faith, one above all others. And how, I wonder, does, Protestant Christian priority fit with that figure on a cross demonstrating power made perfect in weakness, the one who championed a different kingdom based on service and sacrifice instead of privilege and superiority? So, excuse me, bearing all of this in mind, I would like to startle you, for about 10 seconds anyway, by expressing my own aspiration to be a faithful Protestant. Okay? Still breathing? Let me explain by referencing this book here by Paul Tillich, one of my theological heroes. It's a lovely second-hand book. I love the smell of old books, don't you? Anyway, this book by Paul Tillich is called The Protestant Era, in which he argues that it is not Protestantism that needs preserving, but something else which he called the Protestant Principle. So Tillich importantly distinguishes between Protestantism as a historical movement, beginning with Luther, and resulting, as we know, in various denominational forms of Christianity opposed to Catholicism. He distinguishes between all of that and a Protestant critical process or principle expressed and enacted by Luther, but which transcends Luther and Lutheranism, Protestantism, which transcends even Christianity. And this is a distinction which underlies an awful lot of Paul Tillich's theological work. Martin Luther, of course, protested against the pretension of medieval Catholicism to represent God infallibly on the authority of its tradition and to grant salvation exclusively to those who accepted that authority and partook of its institutional means of grace. The originating spirit of Protestantism was revealed in Luther's audacity to dissent from all that and to resist the Church's claim to infallible divine authority and consequently to question its dogma and its practices. But Tillich's argument is that this didn't start or stop with Luther, that Protestantism itself, like every other religious system, must also be subjected to the protesting principle, as he calls it. Tillich had great doubts about the future of Protestantism as a denominational expression of Christianity. In fact, he believed the Protestant era was drawing to a close and a new, different form of faith to either Catholicism or Protestantism was now required. But he argued that, setting all of that aside, even with the demise of Protestantism, the Protestant principle, as he called it, would never end. So let me just be clear what we're talking about. The Protestant principle, as Tillich understood it, is a restless, critical, and creating power which protests every claim to absolute truth, including our own in the shed, by the way, should we have it. In other words, any person or institution or movement that in effect says, this is the truth, full stop, is to be doubted, questioned, protested, and resisted. And if it isn't protested, Tillich said, it will result in idolatry. Religious truth, political ideology too, must never be absolutized, but remain provisional and constantly seeking greater clarity and understanding. And if it doesn't do that, it will become a form of idolatry. This is what he wrote. Let me just put this up on the screen for you. He says, the first word to be spoken by religion to the people of our time must be a word spoken against religion. It's worth reading that statement again. The first word to be spoken by religion to the people of our time must be a word against religion. It's the word the old Jewish prophets spoke against the priestly, royal, and pseudo-prophetic guardians of their national religion, who consecrated distorted institutions and distorted politics without judging them. The same word must be spoken today about our religious institutions and politics. So his reference to the Hebrew prophets there underscores Tilloch's point that the Protestant principle, or the Protesting principle, transcends not only Protestantism but Christianity too. As I say, I actually prefer to speak of it as a Protesting principle rather than Protestant, because I think that saves a bit of confusion. But Tilloch's point, I guess, is that the Reformation was a defining moment for that protesting, doubting, critical spirit, which in the end is our salvation from turning beliefs into absolutes and therefore idols. So the importance of the Protestant Reformation wasn't in the churches and denominations it produced, but in the way it dramatically revealed the way that religion or any variety of tradition can and often does become the basis for justifying human pretensions by claiming indisputable divine authority, and it must be protested. Catholicism claims divine authority historically by absolutizing human tradition. Protestants do the same by absolutizing the Bible, and more importantly, by absolutizing particular interpretations of the Bible. Progressive Christians like me may similarly do the same by absoluting aspects of contemporary culture or our own questions, absolutizing our questions or critical scholarship. I mean, none of us is above the principle of vigilance concerning the human tendency to confuse certainty with divine truth. And that's what we're talking about, the confusion between divine truth and certainty. Paul Tillich was, in the truest and best sense, a theologian of mediation. He titles his autobiography On the Boundary because he saw the image of being on the borderline as a fitting symbol for the whole of his personal and intellectual development. It's been my fate in almost every direction, he writes, to stand between alternative possibilities of existence. And so he reflects, for example, on the boundary situation between the different temperaments of his parents, between city and country, between social classes, between reality and imagination, between theory and practice, between church and society, religion and culture. Perhaps it's partly why I'm so attracted to Tilloch's work, because in my own modest way, I too seem to have had a life lived on various borders. It's where I feel comfortable in places of paradox and ambiguity, in both and instead of either or. Most of all, I love Tilloch's understanding of the task of theology to be mediation. If the mediating task of theology is rejected, he said, then theology itself is rejected, because the term theology, implies itself a mediation, namely between the mystery, which is theos, and the understanding, which is logos. If some biblicists, pietists, evangelicals are opposed to the mediating function of theology, he says, they deceive themselves. Why? Because no group or denomination, no school of theology, no religion, be it Christian or whatever, has direct access to the mystery that we name God. So the entire pursuit of religion is a process of mediation between that eternal mystery that we call God and the finite resources of human understanding to grasp that mystery, which I think brings us back to the idea that we should wish to defend something in Britain called Reformed Protestant religion, or to preserve inviolably the doctrine, worship, discipline, and blah blah of the Church of England. I think it brings us back to the idea that this is basically a nonsense. As a dedicated serving priest in the Church of England, I say, no thank you. Protestant, Catholic, Anglican, Pentecostal, Muslim, Jew, whatever, we're all part of the humbling task of trying to mediate mystery with understanding, divinity with ordinary earthly existence. And so any and every claim to bypass that task, to have a hotline to heaven, or to possess absolute divine truth and sanction, has to be protested, resisted, set aside for the more modest task of living the truth through love. But here's the thing. What was said in the coronation service was tradition, which I for one wish was never included, but it was tradition, which I have confidence King Charles will transcend, because I think he's a bigger man than that. But what we're seeing more widely in the world is far more worrying. I'm talking about an increased vigour in fundamentalist ideologies, frightening, zealous intentions to push back the tide of liberality, to push back and eliminate the celebration of diversity and difference by bringing everything down to one understanding of who God is and what truth is about. If we ever needed a true reformation, an exercise of the Protestant Principle, a conquest of love over dogma, it's now. I'm going to talk about that more next time. That'll do us for the moment, I think. But here's a prayer which I think is very fitting. Yahweh, Jesus, Allah, God. I don't suppose you're very bothered about titles. You seem to revel more in creating and loving than arguing like we do. You are beyond any name, beyond this group or that, beyond ideas or any ability to control you by definitions. You are the utterly free one. You are the eternal I that always allows me to be a thou whenever we meet. You are the speaker. I am the spoken. So love must be your name, which is always beyond words. Amen. Well, it's thirsty work, this gabbing away, so it's time to have a drink, I think. And so I invite you to grab a hold of one or pour one right now and join me in a toast. And today, I only heard this today on the news, is that today has been made Celebration Day. It's a sort of non-religious day to remember and celebrate loved ones who are no longer with us. So, secular or not, I'm happy with that. Here's a toast to friends, absent but still present. A toast to loved ones who will never leave our hearts. A toast to love, which, like the air all about us, unites and sustains us. To life, L'chaim. There you go. Thanks so much for being with me today, guys. And as I say, we're going to carry on with this theme in a different way next week. If you like all of this, if you enjoy what I'm doing, you can support us by buying us a coffee. All you need to do is follow the link on the screen here, go to the coffee site, and you can buy us a coffee or whatever. We are really appreciative for all the support that you give us through this means and through lots of others. Thank you so much. So a little parish notice is that this week on Tuesday at 7 p.m. I am leading a soul space. It's a Zoomed soul space hosted by my friends in Croydon, and as you can see, we're thinking about Perfectly Imperfect. So if you can join us for that, you will love it. You'll enjoy it, I know. And I'll be putting the link up on Facebook, or you can, you can Google it and find it. And that's great. I hope to see you. And we're going to finish with a prayer for Pentecost, because it is Pentecost Sunday today. And this is my Pentecost prayer. You know, the word spirit is exactly the same word in Hebrew as the word for breath or wind or air that's all around us. So God the Spirit is helpfully understood, I think, by thinking about the way in which the atmosphere of fresh air and breath is all about us and within us. Breath of all creation, recycled 1 billion times each day in the lungs of creatures great and small. Ventilate our souls also with your free spirit, that we may inhale each newly created moment with exuberance, joy, and expectancy, living each one as if it were our last, and never, ever holding our breath for some better time to come. Amen. Well, there you go. That's it for this week, and I'm going to post a link for a song that you might want to listen to end. I'm not going to play it because, last week I played the Eric Bibb song, and Facebook went and took it off because I didn't have the right to use it. So, hey, there you go. So, this is a song by the Texas Lounge Lizards, great band, and the song is called One True God. They're a band who do an awful lot of, taking the pee out of people, and this is a wonderful song of people who think their God is the one true God. So take a listen to it if you fancy that, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.